Welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Friday, February 1st. We're trying to get a little bit ahead of life. It's trying to take over and won't be able to do our forecast on Sunday, so we're doing it today. Better early than not at all. Okay, looking at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean, we see a small developing little low-pressure system off of California generating 22-foot seas. Not of any particular interest. Whatever it does produce will be very raw and undisciplined. Of more interest, though, a broad area of seas in the 26-27-foot range is pushing off the Kuril Islands. That is producing swell, another in a long series of swells targeting Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. Let's get into the details. As usual, we'll start this week's tour looking at jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales. When they do form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough that is a dip in the jet, sort of like there. That's a very gentle trough, but regardless, when you get a trough, that helps create an eddy in the upper level atmosphere, or sort of a counterclockwise circulation, and that also manifests itself down at the surface, and that is the hallmark of low pressure. And of course, low pressure generates wind. Winds generate seas. Seas, as they radiate away from the fetch area, turn into swell. Swell, when it hits your beach, turns into surf. So we have a pretty good, healthy, consolidated jet stream flow pushing off Japan. Winds to 190 knots, reaching almost to the date line. But notice the jet stream splits before it even gets to the date line. Northern branch sort of pushes north, undulates around, starts forming a trough here off the U.S. West Coast. That is what is supporting developing low pressure off of California and Oregon at the moment. And then the southern branch sort of dips to the south here, and then it splits again, part of it heading south, part of it heading north. And in between the split jet stream here, it's not real clear. It's kind of a muddled pattern, but the suspicion is that at least like in here, high pressure is probably trying to develop. But we'll find out more when we dig into the surface level charts. All right, let's put this into motion. Here we go. We're into Saturday. Jet still pretty healthy. You can see actually an upper level low, 9,600 versus 98. You get the idea here. A little bit of low pressure. That's low pressure here over Kamchatka. The split prevails. The trough off California builds a little bit. Not a lot of wind energy going into it. All the focus is in the West Pacific. Sunday, now the jet starts fading. Notice the split point does make it over the date line. 170 west, probably big high pressure right there. Another little trough tries to develop off the U.S. West Coast, falling south. That it's just a series of small local low pressure systems likely for the Oregon, California area. And then, you know, pretty much the same old thing. We'll just roll this out. You see another trough developing on the date line on Sunday night. Winds weaker, though trying to redevelop to 160 knots here over Japan. Roll this out a little further. Just the same sort of pattern going on and on. Little pockets of wind energy carving out troughs, creating low pressure likely in the West Pacific, while high pressure builds over the Gulf of Alaska. As we get into Wednesday, finally, the low pressure pattern looks to be clearing out of, did I say Wednesday? Hopefully. Yes, the low pressure pattern begins clearing out of the California area. High pressure builds in. Now, the interesting thing is, wind energy also starts dying in the jet. It gets a little bit broader. It doesn't split, but it doesn't look particularly supportive of gale development as we get into Thursday. We'll roll this out some more. Split point still about 170 west. The jet pushing directly over Hawaii. That would probably not be good for weather there. Oops, and there we are at 180 hours. So we'll look at this. Here's where we are. More energy, split pattern. And then we go 180 hours, less energy, split pattern, no real change. So the pattern, reasonably good. I mean, it's been supporting a lot of gale energy in the West Pacific, but it's kind of interesting how the total wind energy in the jet a week from now is to be weaker. And we can just tell you, the active phase of the MJO is still to be building in the West Pacific. So not a normal tight correlation between the jet and the MJO. All right, let's go take a look down at the surface. Here we are, surface level pressure, surface level winds, and remember the jet was troughing a bit here. Well, there's your low pressure, 958 millibar low there. And it was ridging, sort of doing one of these things. And sure enough, there's two high pressure systems. And then it was troughing right out here. And sure enough, there's your low pressure. So pretty good correlation between upper level and lower levels of the atmosphere. So we'll roll this out. Eyes, if you live in California, on low pressure here. Notice winds. We'll get into it in the more detailed portion of the forecast, but a weather pattern certainly shaping up for California and the Sierra. Meantime, good size fetch of 35-knot winds on Friday night, pushing off the Kuril Islands, generating some swell for sure. Look at this, as we get into Saturday, 40-knot winds off California. That's going to generate wind swell for sure, and more low pressure falling south. Okay, same kind of pattern. We continue out, we're into Sunday, and you can still see the low pressure pattern along California. Here comes another system building Monday off the North Japan Kuril Islands. This one a little bit stronger, 50-knot winds, building to 55 knots on Monday night. And right about there, holding about 55 knots, maybe some 60-knot winds embedded in that. Pushing out to approaching the date line as we get in Tuesday night, starting to fade. Still a pretty solid area of winds. Another one behind that on Wednesday, small area of 55-knot winds. And then, but that one kind of fading, not as strong. 45-knot winds pushing over the date line on Thursday, and then fading as it gets into the western Gulf. But actually, look at that, a little bit of low pressure moving over the date line towards the Gulf of Alaska. Maybe that's a step in the right direction, or maybe it's just dumb luck. A little bit too early to know. All right, let's go take a look at the effect of winds on the ocean surface. So here we go, significant wave heights, but we're going back in time a little bit to Sunday, the 27th. So what's that? Earlier, you can see why we're looking. Developing storm. This was last Sunday. Approaching the date line. Small area, 40-knot, 40-foot, 41-foot seas, and that system built, redeveloped, and got 44-foot seas on Monday. This was last Monday, pushing over the date line. The point being that swell has already passed Hawaii, is starting to hit California now. Pure swell, something like 5 or 6 feet at 20 seconds in Northern California an hour or so ago. So swell in the water, long period. You see where it's coming from. Another small system built behind that, and it not nearly as powerful, but swell from this one is pushing towards Hawaii, if not about ready to arrive. And that system faded out, and that gets us where we are right now. All right, let's go take a look into the future. The point being, there's one swell for California, another behind that, and one swell for Hawaii before we even get into the forecast. So 2 swells in the water. And then here comes this next system building off the Kuril Islands on Saturday, 26, 27-foot seas, building to 28 feet, sort of double-lobed type thing there. That's more swell, yet another swell for Hawaii and for the U.S. West Coast. Also take a look off California. We'll go back here. You get the general idea. As winds build with local low pressure, 26-foot seas aimed directly at the coast, or up to 28 feet, there we go. But seeing how it's very close to the coast, just a jumbled, raw, ugly mess is the expected outcome surf-wise in California. All right, then we get into Tuesday, and new system building, 48-foot seas, and what is that? Building to 52-foot, any more than that? Nope, that was it. Peak, 52 feet on 18Z on Tuesday, so that's about 10 a.m. Tuesday morning. Supposedly pushing over the date line and then fading some. And then another system there's that little low. It was actually supposed to be stronger on this morning's run of the model, so we'll keep our eyes on what's going on here. Wouldn't be surprised to see perhaps another system behind that. But the short of it, a whole series of swells. You can look at this one. Hitting Hawaii on, we're talking a week out. Whole series of swells in the water or forecast. So the beat goes on. Much energy in the North Pacific. We need some decent conditions. So let's take a look. High pressure right here. Non-stop northeast winds for the Hawaiian Islands. Just a ugly, blown-out Kona mess for the most part. It's been that way for a long time. It's been actually quite a few years since we've seen such a long run of northeast winds. Likewise, here's the developing two low-pressure systems building off California. South winds already in effect in Northern California and probably somewhat down the coast as well. Southern California is still protected at the moment. But as the time we get into 0Z, that's 4 p.m. California time, 30-knot south winds from, Big Sur on northward. Oh, I said 30, right? Yes. Building to 40 knots by 10 p.m. Just pretty ugly, a strong local weather system. And then 45-knot winds, not on the coast, only 20 knot as we get into Saturday morning, but just a jumbled mess. Why? Winds finally turned trades as we get into, actually, let's go back. When did the trades set up? So there we are Friday, so we'll go, probably it looks like about Saturday morning, trades barely, east-northeast, pretty brisk, 20 knots. And then, okay, Sunday. So here we are, a mess in California. Northeast winds, 10, 15 knots maybe for the Hawaiian Islands. Yep, look at that, clocking back around, building high pressure. Just cannot escape that northeast wind pattern. Go into Monday, maybe some hope, looking a little better for Hawaii. Still a mess. Look at this, another broad gale developing with 35-knot winds off the California coast. And so we'll get into Tuesday. Still no hope. Low pressure off of San Francisco. Trades finally set in for the Hawaiian Islands. You need that high pressure to get east of the Hawaiian Islands. Then you get trades sort of off the south end of the high. Tuesday, finally, high pressure takes over the entire Gulf of Alaska, 1032 millibar high. North winds along the California coast, trades pretty brisk, 20 knots into Hawaii. And then, where are we? Thursday, same sort of deal. And Friday, almost looks like northeast winds again for the Hawaiian Islands, 20, 25 knots. Oh, see, look at that, high pressure, 1032 millibar high, north of the islands. So where do we go from here? North wind still for the U.S. West Coast. And there we are, we're at 180 hours out. And has anything really changed relative to Hawaii in a week? No, probably not. U.S. West Coast, yeah, we went from south winds to north winds, but really no escape from the wind for anybody other than a brief couple of windows in Hawaii. Not too good for surfing. All right, next up, precipitation forecast. I don't think we have to worry about being in a drought for California, and you'll see why. This part of the forecast is all on California. Here's our double barrel low pressure system. We'll put this into motion. You see rain developing, not particularly hard, as we get into 4 p.m. on Saturday. No precip really for the mountains either. As we get into, let's say, 10 o'clock Saturday night, yeah, a little bit of snow, the higher elevations of the Sierra. Pretty good, solid bit of rain, but not over-the-top rain relative to California, reaching down into Southern California. And then Saturday morning, the snow starts building in the Sierra. Good solid rain all along the coast of California, mainly we'll say from Point Arena southward, but also working its way into Southern California. And look at this pocket of very heavy rain pushing into Santa Barbara County, maybe down to Ventura, that area, maybe even further. That's at 10 a.m. Heavy, heavy snow developing for the Sierra. And then as we get into the evening, heavy rain into San Diego. Heavy snow for the Sierra continues, and rain along the coast. Sunday, things still heavy snow for the Sierra, starting about at Tahoe, working its way south. And then Sunday, more of the same. Lighter rain along the coast now. Southern California getting a chance to try to dry out a little bit. This is, when you see this sort of thing, it just means maybe light scattered showers, not anything steady. Though up north, notice this, snow out over the ocean even off of Oregon. So cold core low pushing down the coast. That'll amplify the snow effect into the Sierra. You can see Sunday night, heavy snow for Tahoe down into the Mammoth area, continuing into Monday, and pretty solid even Monday night. Then maybe starting to taper off a little as we get into Tuesday. Rain continuing along the coast. You're getting the idea here. Just non-stop. So it's a Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday rain and snow event. And then finally, Tuesday night, things clear out. Here comes our big high pressure building in. And after that, the precip is gone. So a four and a half day precip event for the coast. And for the mountains, we'll take it any way we can get it. All right, estimated snowfall totals. Notice a pretty healthy chart here. 76, 77 inches through the 5th. So what's the 4th is what? Monday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday night through Tuesday midday. 75 inches, Squaw Valley. Let's take a look at snow levels. So here is the actual liquid precipitation amounts, not particularly scaled. And here's the snow level. Here's the base of Squaw. So right as the snow arrives, snow levels should be dropping, and all this should be snow fall from the base the whole way up to the top for Squaw. Wind speeds, actually, not too bad. Here we go. We'll get them all lined up here. Oops, there we go. You see, yeah, maybe 40, 45 knots, but not too bad until you get into the Monday, Tuesday part of it, then 60-knot winds, but certainly not an arc event, a atmospheric river, jet stream moving in. No, not one of those events. So that gives us some hope that the Tahoe resorts maybe won't be as shut down as one could possibly think. Let's go take a look at Kirkwood. Kirkwood doing even a bit better, maybe 81 inches of snow. And again, the same sort of profile. Here is the base of the resort. It's higher, 8,000 feet, so no worry whatsoever about liquid precipitation at Kirkwood. Winds, a little bit more of an issue because they're higher, 80 knots. Yeah, 80 knots. So maybe things a bit blowing there. And the good news, Mammoth is in the mix too here. 68 inches of snow over the same time period, and their very high base, 8,000 feet, fully, even though further south, looks like all the precipitation will be in snow and much colder there. Good news, and then even going on for a week past that. So good deal. Wind. Yeah, 60 knots, 65, maybe 70 knots during the event. So pick your poison. Either way, a lot of snow if you're going to be up in the mountains, but get there early. And if you don't have four-wheel drive, I wouldn't go. And bring a shovel. You're going to be doing some digging. All right, let's take a look long-term. What's going on with the MJO? We alluded to that a little bit earlier. And El Nino or not? I guess we're going to find out. As usual, we like to start looking at winds across the equatorial Pacific. So this is data from the TAO buoy array, a series of buoys strung across the equator, the whole way across the Pacific, used for monitoring El Nino, but also can be used for monitoring what's going on with the MJO. This is the equator, East Pacific here, there's the equator. West Pacific here, that's New Guinea right there. Kind of a cryptic looking chart. But you look at the arrows, that tells you this is 5-day average winds. It's not like winds at this moment. It's not like the buoys, off the coast that you can get real-time readings. This is a 5-day average. But you see winds, trades from the east the whole way across the Pacific until you get to about the date line. Then the arrows start pointing south. But they aren't east. They're not west. They're pretty much turning neutral, at least is what it looks like, not an east or westerly component. But we look at anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. You see, really here, the arrows are, maybe a little bit stronger out of the east in one little pocket right there and there. But as soon as you get south of Hawaii, westerly anomalies start developing. This is the hallmark of the active phase of the MJO, the Madden-Julian oscillation, a pretty cyclical oscillation that travels from west to east on the equator the whole way around the planet. When in the active phase, it sort of acts like a pocket of low pressure. Winds turn from the west, you get more cloudiness. It traverses the whole way across the Pacific, and north of wherever the active phase is where all the storminess is. Okay, so we're on the date line. Remember looking at the previous charts? All our storminess was in the West Pacific, driven by the active phase right there. As the active phase moves east, it'll drag the storm pattern with it. And then likewise, you get the inactive phase that would follow behind. It is typically characterized by clear skies, easterly anomalies, and then you get high pressure, and then basically you get no storm activity. All right, let's move on. What have winds been doing the past 5 days? Okay, South America there. We're looking for the equator right along there, 0 degrees, right? And the Kelvin wave generation area, that's the area we're really interested in. It's the West Pacific, 5 degrees north and south of the equator from 135 east, so right there out to about just a little bit east of the dateline, 170 west. Draw a box in your mind right there. When you get westerly anomalies or the active phase in there, and you get westerly anomalies blowing long and hard enough, it'll take warm water in the West Pacific, push it to depth, create a bubble of warm water that'll traverse the whole Pacific. Eventually that warm bubble will erupt along the coast of Ecuador and create a warm slick out here on the ocean surface. If you get enough Kelvin waves, and they take like 3 months each one from the time it forms till the time it erupts off the coast, but if you can get a series of those back to back, that's what really helps feed El Nino. All right, so today, well, 26, going back a couple of days, we see, generalized west anomalies in the Kelvin wave generation area, and we're just going down day by day. Pretty good westerly pocket here, east of the date line, and backfilling, so that looks like the active phase of the MJO. Westerly anomalies on the equator from the far West Pacific to, in this case, a point south of Hawaii. In fact, I think that's Hawaii right there. You can barely see it. All right, so what's the forecast? So here's a little bit different style chart, but we use it to look at the forecast. It's the whole planet on one chart. Date line runs right up the middle, so the Kelvin wave generation area is between these two tick marks, and the Pacific, so right between there and there, going straight up the chart. Remember, this is past history here, okay? And the Pacific ends somewhere right about here. So what you get is the sense of right now, westerly anomalies in the Kelvin wave generation area in the West Pacific, and the blues are the reds, and oranges are westerly anomalies. The blues are easterly anomalies, but the reds are in the Kelvin wave generation area. So one could say active phase of the MJO in the Kelvin wave generation area, generating a pretty healthy but not over the top fetch of westerly winds. That should be feeding the jet stream, which we know it is. The jet stream is pretty healthy. You can kind of see here was another westerly wind burst in the January time frame. Then this might have been, one could say, not really the inactive phase of the MJO, but something like it, and then the active phase building right now. All right, so that gives you sort of a sense short term, 1 week out. Let's go a little bit longer. So this is a way to go 2 weeks out. And this is outgoing long-wave radiation. What's outgoing long-wave radiation? It's basically sunlight reflecting off the ocean or off the land. Where you see negative anomalies, the blues, that is less sunlight reflectivity. And so what that means is there's a bunch of clouds in the atmosphere preventing the reflectivity. When you see the reds, that's positive values. That means high pressure. That means a lot of sunlight reflectivity. That means the inactive phase of the MJO. So here we are, South America, Australia, New Guinea there. Kelvin wave generation area right here. Blues centered right in it. Sure looks like the active phase of the MJO. The forecast per the statistic model, this goes out 15 days or about 2 weeks, has the active phase moving to the date line a little bit maybe east of the date line. The dynamic model, I like this one better. It has the active phase holding in the West Pacific, weakening, then rebuilding, and still squarely centered in the Kelvin wave generation area 2 weeks out. That's a 2 week window minimum, probably 3 weeks by the time it moves out to support storm generation. We'll take it. And then we can get a little bit more detailed with these phase diagram charts. So basically it's a chart here, single chart. The circle, assume this is like looking down on the North Pole, okay? And the MJO, active or inactive, moves from west to east, from the Indian Ocean over the maritime continent, across the West Pacific, the East Pacific, under the United States, on the equator only, across the Atlantic on the equator, over North Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. So the MJO goes round and round, okay? The heavy dot is where the active phase is, and the further that dot is away from this circle, the stronger it is. So active phase is in the West Pacific. We'll say modest to moderate in strength. The green line is the forecast track day by day by day. So you see active phase, per this model, the ECMF model, getting very weak, sitting in the West Pacific, and then eventually easing off to across the Atlantic. The GEFS model, though, I like this one better. It says the same thing initially. Yeah, the active phase weakening, but then retrograding and building moderately strong and over the West Pacific and holding, or still in the West Pacific, 2 weeks out. So you can see the difference in the two models. They're both not quite sure what's going to happen. One says the active phase holds and builds. The other says it fades and moves out. 40-day upper level model. So this is where you see greens, areas favorable for precipitation. One could say the active phase of the MJO. And where you have yellows, and we're only looking on the equator, like right there, then one would say the inactive phase. So inactive phase in the Indian Ocean, active phase in the West Pacific. And according to this model, the active phase fades, moves east, and is out of the Pacific starting about February 21st, with the inactive phase moving into the West Pacific. That would certainly shut down the storm production potential, and then it too moving out of the Pacific as we get into mid-March, with another active phase behind that. So we think this one is siding more with the statistic model and the ECMF model. Then there's the CFS model, same sort of deal, all the planet on one chart, the date line running right up the middle, Kelvin wave generation area between these two tick marks, the Pacific from there to about there. The reds are westerly anomalies. You can see right now, January 31st, area reds, west anomalies completely encasing the West Pacific Ocean. The interesting part on is this, so that's 1 week out. You get about a week and a half out. And what do we have? Very strong westerly anomalies rebuilding in the Kelvin wave generation area, say February 10th or so, something like that, and holding into the 20th. And even after that, solid westerly anomalies filling the Kelvin wave generation area. This almost looks like a resurgence of this El Nino-like pattern that we had earlier this year. It sort of seems like it took some time off, and according to this model, if you believe a model that goes out a month, it says, hey, maybe things are going to get way more interesting here as we get into mid to late February. And then here's the even longer run of the CFS model. All right, so here's where we are today. Same deal. That's the Kelvin wave generation area between these two tick marks going up. All right, and you see when I see yellows and oranges like this, that suggests a westerly wind burst, a very strong, maybe some westerly wind event in the Kelvin wave generation area, capable perhaps of creating a Kelvin wave. Let's overlay the MJO. Now here we are. We have the solid contour is the active phase of the MJO. Not particularly strong, just one as compared to this active phase. It had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 contour lines. This one only has one, but strong westerly anomalies nonetheless. And that's from the time frame starting about February 9th into about February 25th. Not too bad. Inactive phase to follow. Westerly anomalies continue in the Kelvin wave generation area, and then you get into the we'll say late March time frame, a strong active phase and another westerly wind burst. Now, we're never going to believe a model 3 months out, but interesting sort of thing here is El Nino was kind of dying and we had written it all off. Kind of looks like it's waking up. Let's go take a look at the low pass filter. Maybe that will give us some clues. Ah, there we go. Okay, so we had 1, 2, 3 contour lines through about December 15th, and this is where all the hype was around El Nino. This low-pass filter really suggests, when you see solid contour lines in the Pacific, this is the area where favorable for low pressure or sort of a low-pressure bias. It kind of died here. And now the model is saying February 14th, that low-pressure bias is supposed to wake up again. And we had seen maybe just a little pocket of this, of 3 contour lines, and that was it. But just the past day or so, the model's been hinting at, oh no, maybe this is all rebuilding. So that would help to, the 3 contour line goes to the end of the model run. Interesting. So this would suggest maybe that things El Nino-like, though they died between this period, maybe we'll get a little bit of a resurgence, and maybe the jet stream will then wake up, and maybe the storm track will wake up, and more precipitation. You get the general idea. Also notice here, the low-pressure bias. So California, like San Francisco's at 122 west, would be out here. So this low-pressure bias pushing well into the coast here. It's supposed to retract a little bit, pulling away from the coast maybe late March time frame, but not out of the picture. And as if this builds here, my guess is, see, when you had 3 contours, they start expanding in coverage. We'll see this branching out over time as we get into May, June time frame. Not that it really matters then, because we're kind of out of the storm cycle and winter. But that maybe this is the setup for next year. All right. Enough MJO talk. What's going on in the ocean? East Pacific here, West Pacific here. This is going depth down 100 meters to 300 meters. This is data from the TAO buoy array. Same buoys. Here's the anchor lines, and the X's are the sensors, temperature sensors on the anchor line. They gather data. They beam that up to satellites. It ends up at a collection data center in Maryland somewhere, I believe. And then the data is crunched. They apply a model to it, and they build a graphic. So you can get a sort of sense. These temperatures, 30 degrees centigrade. Warm pocket here. At one point, it was at 180 or maybe even 178 west, but the past month or so, it's retracted a little bit. 28-degree isotherm line. It was actually back at 165, I think, last week. It's making a little bit of eastward progress. We'll know why in a second. The 24-degree isotherm pushing into Ecuador, suggesting that warm water is definitely making its way into the East Pacific. That's a sign of El Nino, but is it really El Nino? Well, we'll get into that later in the presentation here. But the reason the 24-degree isotherm is starting to move east is because, here we go, anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. Same data, just strip out the difference from what's going on, and you see right now things are warmer under the dateline than usual. 4 degrees above normal. That is a developing Kelvin wave from a January westerly wind burst. We know there is another westerly wind burst expected in the next month, and maybe another one behind that 2 months out. So this is good news. Now, this would be Kelvin wave number 3. The first one started, I think, in January. We'll check that out in a minute. Anyway, Kelvin wave number 2 has fully moved in and erupted in the Ecuador frame. Still, a thin river of 1 degree anomalies are pushing east. This is probably this -1 degrees. This is the upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave cycle. We expect that to dissipate out in a couple of weeks as this Kelvin wave starts pushing to the east. All right, moving on. Another modeled view of subsurface temperatures, and of course, Kelvin wave number 3. Now this model says Kelvin wave number 2 still is lingering a little bit better than what was suggested on the previous chart, but here's our upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave cycle here, cooler waters. So you normally get a Kelvin wave, then behind it you get cool water behind it for a little bit, then another Kelvin wave if you're lucky. So this is Kelvin wave number 2 has erupted. Here's the upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave cycle. Here's Kelvin wave number 3 building, pushing off to the east. Sea level anomalies. Whoops, there we go. All right, so South America there, Mexico there, New Guinea there. So this is JSON2 satellite data. Strip out all the winds, strip out the wind, the swell, strip out the wind waves, strip out the tides, what you have. And we're only interested in the equator here. We're looking for positive anomalies like that. 5, that's not 5 centimeters. That means there's a little bump on the ocean surface, 5 centimeters. And here there's a little bump, 0 to 5 centimeters, but it's all over the equator. What this means is if you have warm water at depth, the warm water, of course, expands. And when it expands, it creates a little bump on the ocean surface. And this is a way to suggest you get an idea of, well, what another wave, is there warm water at depth? Clearly there is. Kelvin wave right here, that's what it suggests. Here's your upwelling phase, minus 5 centimeters anomaly, so a little depression in the ocean surface, cooler water there. So this is all confirming what we saw in the previous charts. And then there's this chart. This is sort of a historical look at warm water and its path in the Pacific. So back in March, this is the West Pacific here. This is the East Pacific here. So we're back March 2018, February. So this is last year. Cool water in the East Pacific. That was La Nina. First little Kelvin wave built, pushed the whole way across the Pacific, made it into Ecuador in July. That pretty much was the death of La Nina. Here's your upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave cycle, that little pocket of cool anomalies showing up off of Ecuador. Then much larger Kelvin wave number 2 in the fall. Takes 3 months to get the whole way across the Pacific. It pretty much finished erupting, we'll say, a day or 2 ago. Here's Kelvin wave number 3 building. Yeah, here we are, January. So that it'll take 3 months to make its way across the Pacific. And then looking at the MJO charts, we saw that potentially 2 more westerly wind bursts are forecast for this area, possibly setting up Kelvin waves number 4 and Kelvin waves number 5. Looks interesting. All right, so what's going on at the ocean surface? We talked about the MJO. We talked about westerly wind bursts. We talked about Kelvin waves and how they form and what's the status of all of them. Then we looked at the subsurface ocean temperature profiles to confirm Kelvin waves were in flight. But what's going on at the surface? Well, this is interesting. So we have a good pocket of warm water, best it's been all year in terms of the area just off Peru, Chile, Central America. But on the equator itself, the official El Nino monitoring region is from 120 west. So from here, sort of draw a box out in here. And temperatures are getting steadily weaker. This is the Nino 1.2 area. Yeah, it can get really hot over here, but if it doesn't sort of get caught by the trades and blow over into this area, it tends to not have as much of an effect on the jet stream. Okay, and what this is showing is temperatures are definitely cooling in the Nino 3.4 region, though they're building in the Nino 1.2 region. Then looking further out, here's New Guinea here. Yeah, warm water out to the date line, and then just kind of a mixed pattern. This isn't so much El Nino related over in here in the maritime continent, but just something to be aware of. The 7-day trend chart clearly reflects building warm temperatures along Peru and that area up into Central America, the Galapagos, which is good, but I want to see it out in here too, and we're not so much seeing that. It's kind of just this little bit of cool pockets, a little bit of warm, nothing in particular going on. I mean, but real El Nino, you get kind of this pattern, and this almost looks like the start of something like that. You know, the anvil pattern pushing into South America, but maybe not. Hard to say. So here's the low-res kind of view. Yeah, warming along Peru, Central America, out along the equator, out to the date line. Not bad. Looking good. You know, I mean, this is way better than La Nina last year where we had cool water all right in here. That just stomps on the jet stream. Just, you know, doesn't allow for... So, warm water here helps promote evaporation off the ocean surface. That evaporation transports energy into the jet stream, into the upper atmosphere. The upper atmosphere feeds the jet stream. Jet stream feeds the storm track. So what happens here? feeds the jet stream here, and that pushes in across the Pacific, creates storms and surf and weather into California. Anyway, so we're looking at temperatures in the Nino 1.2 region, that area right along South America. You can see, yeah, this is very noisy. They've been all over the place. Recently, warming along Peru, 0.896 of a degree above normal. So not 1 degree above normal, almost there though. But it's been just as high at other points, 3 other points since November. So nothing particularly noteworthy. The Nino 3.4 region, the official El Nino monitoring region, it was kind of, we'll say about 0.75 of a degree, and then it looks like it kind of stepped down to about a half a degree, and today 0.522. So yeah, you need 5 months of half a degree or better to officially declare a minimal El Nino, and we're getting there. We're approaching that, but there's more than El Nino than just what's going on in the water. You have to have an atmospheric component as well. So then there's other indices you can look at. The Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. When pressure is lower over Tahiti, that's a sign of El Nino, or at least the active phase of the MJO, and the index should go negative. Today's value, positive 6.96, and if anything, is, just looking at it for the past 2 weeks, it's not going negative, that's for sure. The 30-day average strips some of the noise out of this. You can use this to monitor phases of the MJO. Today's value, minus 1.52. If we were in a good active phase of the MJO, this should be down around minus 8 or 10 or something. We haven't really been like that for a month, at least. So nothing there. The 90-day average used for monitoring El Nino, this, if we were in El Nino, should be minus 15 or something like that. Today we're at positive 2.65. So no sign of El Nino, no real sign of the active phase of the MJO in this index. And if anything, all it says is everything is neutral and kind of dead. And here's the 30-day SOI graphed out so you can sort of look for a trend or something. So this is back 2017. So the downward shifts are the spikes in the MJO, the active phase of the MJO, upward inactive phase of the MJO. If you're in El Nino, the index should all be down here for a year or two. Where we are right now, pretty much dead neutral. Here is that thing that made us think El Nino was starting to develop in 2018, and then somewhere around the October-November time frame, it just sort of died, and the index started rising, 30-day average. Now we're starting to move back negative again, and the hope is we'll head back down into here if these active phases of the MJO really set up the way they're forecast and westerly wind bursts, and you get the idea. We want to be down on the bottom side of the zero line. Okay, and the other index, the ESPI index. Instead of difference in pressure between the area north of Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti, this is precipitation, total precipitation amount. If you have warm water in this part, there's South America, right? New Guinea there, Australia, here's the equator. If you have warm water in this area, like the Nino 3.4 region we were talking about, then you're going to get more evaporation, right? And this index will go positive, meaning more precipitation here. Today's value, minus 0.18, meaning if anything, temperatures or evaporation or rainfall in this area is a little bit less than normal, not more than normal, as it should be if El Nino were developing. All right, oops, blah, 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 blah. And then finally, the forecast, the official forecast from the CFS version 2 model for the Nino 3.4 region, the official El Nino monitoring region. Okay, back in January it said temperatures were 0.75 of a degree above normal. And that's officially, I think, where they were. And the forecast says by February they should be up to 1 degree above normal. That's certainly El Nino. And holding, if not building, to 1.2 degrees above normal as we get into July. Maybe fading a bit. The details of this, I don't believe. I think temperatures are going to continue to hover around 0.75 of a degree above normal. But the point being, if they really do that and they hold through all of next summer into next fall, we could be in pretty good shape in terms of a healthy jet stream. I mean, when you get multiple months, so we got October, November, just 3. So if we get into 5 months of above normal temperatures and then go the whole way through the fall, the summer and into the fall of next year, next winter in terms of swell and storms and precipitation could be pretty good. And I'm almost hoping it's not an El Nino, just this sort of slow bake warming kind of event. And it's happened before. You get multiple years of it goes warm. It's sort of El Nino, but really not. But you get great runs of surf and snow in those sort of situations. And that's what it appears we're heading towards, at least at this moment in time. All right, so we're wrapping things up. The good news, series of multiple swells still pushing towards Hawaii, the U.S. West Coast, no end in sight. Bigger swell, maybe, is forecast developing. Bigger storm west of the date line. Again, another push of swell, a little bit bigger swell. The issue, wind for both Hawaii and the U.S. West Coast. Kind of a bad combination. The good news is lots of precipitation for California, snow in the higher elevations. Pretty stormy situation. Hunker down, make the most of it. The good news is long term, it looks like westerly wind bursts, more Kelvin waves, more potential to either feed an El Nino or at least a generic warm event, looking for another, how often do you get to say, oh yeah, there's going to be surf a year from now? But that's kind of what we're looking like right now. We're not going to sink into some hole. Keep your fingers crossed. Anyway, that's it for this week. We'll do it again next week. Things are going to be a little dicey in terms of our schedule. We'll probably do another like a Thursday, Friday kind of update thing. And at some point, we'll try to get back into the regular Sunday routine. But life, like I said earlier, is trying to take over. We're fighting it. But at the same time, got to do what you got to do. So that's it for this week. Do it again next week. Thanks for watching.